set, and it took about an hour. And by the time I got back to the vehicle, I had a jug of milk in my hands because I couldn't remember what I went in for. And I remember, and I was pretty broken at the time, and I remember in the car, and I was lamenting, like, Lord, like, I want to just get healthy. And it felt like God was saying, John, just have some fun. And at my last story is going to be how that kind of went full circle. But Psalm 77:16-19 read as follows. When the Red Sea saw you, O God, its waters looked and trembled. The sea quaked to its very depths. The clouds poured down rain. The thunder rumbled in the sky. Your arrows of lightning flashed. Your thunder roared from the whirlwind. The lightning lit up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your road led through the sea. Your pathway through the mighty waters. A pathway no one knew was there. And at that time, I was looking for a pathway I did not know was there. Now, this picture, if you can picture when Joseph and his brothers were in Egypt, that family consisted of about 70 people. When they traveled through the Red Sea, when Moses took them through the Red Sea, they don't know the exact numbers, but it was somewhere between 2.5 and 6 million people. And for them to see this display that God put on, that thunder, that lightning, that just this majesty, and that would have been terrifying, I think. And then they went through this pathway that no one knew was there. And there have been a lot of people that have written these comments that the Red Sea was at a very low place at the time. There was almost no water, so God's people could have easily gone through there. And let's say that was the case. Let's say that was truth. Then a different miracle happened. Because they say that there was about 6 inches of water, and all of Pharaoh's men then must have drowned in about 6 inches of water. So no matter how you would view that, there was a miracle that happened, but that wasn't what happened. I want to talk to you about 4 things, 4 stories. The first one is, you've seen in the newspaper, and maybe you've heard, whether via Facebook or radio or whatever, about the break-in that happened at Olympic sports. Well, as it turns out, we are well acquainted with at least one of these people, and it is so easy. We've had people come into our building. This last week it was kind of interesting. There were 2 people actually that came in, and they were pretty angry at these youth, and it was a bit hard to swallow because it felt a bit like they were saying, you are not doing your job. If you were doing your job, this wouldn't be happening. And you kind of receive that a little bit, right? Because these are kids that you've loved, that you've journeyed with, that you want them to succeed. But then when you look at this one young man, and you see his story, and then you see the pathway that he has had to take to this point. He's already the product of a divorce, and I'm saying product, that sounds terrible, but that's how terminology works when you read books, right? But his mom and dad divorced when he was about 4 or 5. And now his mom is remarried to a man that is only about 8 years older than this boy. And this young man, whose new stepdad, has been in jail 3 separate times already in his young life. And this is what he has to be led by, right? But so often we just look at the boy. We don't look at the dad. We don't know the dad's story. And I've had the privilege of walking with the dad as well, because he was one of our kids. And now when you look at the dad's story and you see it unfold and you see the pathway that he had to go along, it's actually substantially worse than this new stepson of his. And then he has told me about his father. He actually never met his father because his dad went to jail while his mom was pregnant, and he never met his father. He doesn't know if his dad is alive. His mom passed away, so the pathway, the trajectory that he took kind of angled and bent and went all over the place, but how do you follow that backwards when you have nothing to start with, right? So that's the story of this boy that goes into Olympic, steals things, but he did more than steal, right? Like from what you've seen, he trashed the place. He used a fire extinguisher. And I think there were about 200 pairs of shoes that were just destroyed, and they're valued at over $100. That's $20,000 just in shoes. What a pathway, right? One of the two people that came in reminded me of a story that happened a number of years ago, where, and I believe I've shared this once before here, but I wanted to repeat this story because it's how we kind of evaluate sometimes our Christian walk, where this woman called a number of years in a row to me at the center and said, "John, how many kids have you led to Christ this year?" And I dreaded the call because I didn't know. I don't know what that number looks like. I don't know what them and Jesus have done, right? And so I'd like, we know of at least 4 kids, and and you'd feel bad, right? And the person on the other end of the phone was being quite hard. Until one year when she called, and I wasn't in a good mindset. So when I recognized her voice because it was one I didn't like. And so when she called, I'm listening going, okay, here we go, bite your tongue. And then she says, "And how many kids have you led to Jesus this year?" I said, "All of them." She says, "What?" I said, "We lead them all to Christ. What they do in that decision-making process is between them and God." And she said, "I've never thought of it that way before." And I said, "Me neither." I was so relieved, and it was just this Holy Spirit moment. And then she started weeping. And I was kind of surprised because it turns out she was assessing her value on how many kids were coming to Christ at Youth for Christ. Because she was praying every day for the kids, every day for the kids. And if it was 4 or 5, she had a measuring stick. There were 4 or 5 that she helped lead to Christ. But now it was all of them. And so when you go through this report and you see the pictures of some of the kids, we can't show the pictures of all the kids because some of them you can't put in print. Some of them you can't show in a social setting. But in here, there are some photos. There's a young lad, he's in grade 8 now. He is part of something pretty brilliant. It's called the Risky Business Lunch. The police, the school, and YFC get together and we determine which kids are struggling a bit and which ones could benefit from a weekly connection, and so we do. This is one of those fellas, and he does make it to school about half the time. And that doesn't seem like a lot, and for me, that wouldn't have been a lot, because I don't recall ever skipping in school when I was in grade 8. I'd have been terrified to, like, first of all, the teacher, and then the principal, and then my dad. That was a terrible chain of events that was going to happen. But this boy, I think, wishes for something like that, because the only discipline that he is getting is at school. And his parents, if you meet them, they're really nice people. They just don't care if their kids go to school or not. And their goal is, you can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't come back to us. That's basically what it looks like. And it sucks, because these kids, like if you talk to him, he's actually pretty brilliant, because he's had to be, because he's had to learn how to circumvent systems. He's had to learn how to negotiate around things. He's actually really good at it. If you meet him, you will always see him with a backpack. And at first, some of the volunteers at the center, when a kid comes in with a backpack, you're thinking, oh, we better check the backpack. Somehow we have to be creative. There might be drugs, there might be alcohol or whatever. But I've already had a conversation with the principal, and I knew what was in the backpack. His very favorite things are in his backpack, because he doesn't know if when he goes home, Mom and Dad will be fighting again, and he's got to find a couch that he can sleep in, or whatever, someplace that he can just crash at. So all of his favorite things are in the backpack. And so one day I just approached him. I said, "Hey, what do you got in there?" He says, "Well, if it's not drugs and alcohol, if that's what you're thinking." I said, "No, totally not. But I'm just curious, like, do you have a pair of sneakers? Do you?" And so he says, "Well, do you want to see?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to see." His favorite, most prized possession is his PS3 controller. He stole that all on his own. That's what he said. And he was proud of it. I was like, You sound proud of yourself. Well, somebody owed me money and they don't know that I took this instead of the money. And you're like, good job. So we got to talk a little bit about what right and wrong looked like. What does the right pathway look for him, right? And so what does the right pathway look like for him? We were supposed to be able to go to the city this last week together on Friday. Had booked it, made arrangements with the principal, but there was only one requirement, and that was that you cannot skip classes for a whole week. And he didn't make it for just 1 week. And so when I had the conversation with him, he said, John, I tried really hard, but I'm stupid. And so that's where sort of it opened up for me. I was like, oh, you think you're stupid? Oh. And he feels that if he shows up in class, he will prove to everybody that he's stupid. That sucks. Another boy, from about the age of 4, he remembers getting beaten. He remembers that his father was a minister, and if he was disruptive during his preaching, sometimes he would even go to the boy in the pew, and they had to sit near the front apparently, but go to the pew and he would grab him and shake him and be angry, and then he'd go back up to the pulpit, and then he would keep preaching. But then after the service, he would either get hit with a piece of lumber or a V-belt or a skipping rope or a branch. You know, he would pick different things. And those were some of the less horrible things that he remembered. The worst ones were when he was being told that he was useless, that he would never amount to anything. And the way that he described it was even rather emotionless. Like there was nothing on the face to suggest that the dad was angry or whatever. It just came matter-of-factly and turned, walked out, and left. And you might think to yourself, like, what becomes of a boy like that, right? He was one of the younger children of a family of 9 kids, but none of the other kids got this. It was just him. And even the siblings talked about it, saying, I wonder why it's just him. And you know what I call that man that hit that boy? I actually call him Dad. That was my father. And sometimes I have to go back to that place and remind myself of the journey that I was on. What pathway took me to where I'm at right now? Because my story is not unique. It's not worse than somebody else's. Well, I guess it could be if you did the comparative, but I didn't know different. That was my life. That was what I had to negotiate through, figure out how best to just get from point A to point B. I wasn't looking at X or Y or Z. I was just, how do I get to B? Okay, now how do I get to C? And when I look at the lives of the young people that we serve, that's really all they're trying to do. They're trying to figure out, how can I best get through this school day? That I don't get mocked, I don't get bullied. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe how do I get noticed? How do I see somebody that will come alongside me, love me, walk with me, journey with me? When I sit in a pew here and I get to hear songs of praise, worship, I've got a board member, one of my bosses, sitting at the piano, helping to lead this. You know how cool that feels? Because Monday through Friday, very often, there aren't a lot of cool things. But sometimes there are. Sometimes you get those little tidbits where somebody comes in and says, guess what? I'm only doing weed now. I've dropped meth, I've dropped cocaine, I've dropped alcohol. And we celebrate. We make sure they know that is a huge accomplishment, because what they've really done is they've said no to some fairly consistent, reliable coping mechanisms in the moment, right? And we can't just say to them, now you stop it. We want you to stop everything right now, because if you don't replace that coping mechanism with another coping mechanism, well, what could they do? Over the last month and a half, we've had something brilliant happen at the youth center. And you're actually the first church family that's going to hear this. But we opened up, we had somebody that came to us and said, you know what? We want to sponsor Youth for Christ with 50 Bibles. And this is the Bible. And these were $50 each, these Bibles. These are hardcover, beautiful, easy to read Bibles. And we're like, oh, sweet. We thought, okay, well, we don't often get requests, but let's see how this goes. So we put it out there to the kids, brought out a Bible, said, okay, somebody has said, here you go. And whoever wants one of these Bibles, we're going to make sure that your name is imprinted on the hardcover on the front. To date, we have given away 47 of those 50 Bibles. 47! We didn't give away 47 Bibles in the previous 12 years that I was there. But it's about pathways. It's about taking a chance, taking a risk. When somebody gives you something and you go, okay, that's got to be a cue. So we open it up, and the kids just started coming forward. And it was weird, because we were almost like, are you sure? Like, you know this is for a Bible, right? You know, like, so my own Bible? But if we would have done it at any other time, it wouldn't have met with a success. We had to be obedient when we were asked to be obedient. You cannot push stuff like that on somebody. And nor should you. We're not looking to scare the hell out of someone. That's got very short-term gains. Jesus loves you. You know, one thing that was really cool, we were reading through John 3. We got this study group that started with just the volunteers, male volunteers at the youth center, and it started off with 4, then 5, then 6. We now have 11 guys that come every Tuesday. So from 7 till 8:30, and you can pray for this, I would invite you to. From 7 to 8:30, we've got a bunch of boys that each one of the volunteers, if you're coming, you have to bring a boy. That's the rule. And so we had 11 boys and 11 men, and we had just the greatest time this last week, Tuesday. So from 7 to 8:30, we play floor hockey with these boys. And then from 8:30 to 11, the men, we go upstairs and we share a little bit about what that journey is looking like, what the pathways are looking like. How is this relationship changing with the boys as a result of exercising with them regularly, praying with them regularly, snacking with them regularly. And it's been so amazing. These guys just look forward to it. There's just this appetite for it. And we get to journey with them. We get to say, hey, this is what our pathway looks like. So what's your pathway look like? Who are you taking along on your pathway that you didn't know was there? Last time I went late and somebody reminded me of that, so I'm not going to do that. We're good. Okay. Now, full circle. Remember me at the co-op parking lot? Supposed to get bread, but I got milk an hour later, and I was literally weeping. I was like, come on, Lord, like, something's got to give, right? And then God says, you should try having a little fun. Well, I got called in by co-op, and they said, hey, would you like to do a shopping spree first of all, they said for 3 minutes, that's where it started, and you try to get $500 worth of stuff in a 3-minute window, but you have to keep one hand on the cart. I was like, oh, this sounds like fun. And they said, yeah, we just thought, like, we wanted you to have some fun. And I was like, I like fun. I wanted to have fun. But then the morning when I got there, they said, oh, actually, the rules are different. I said, oh, what's the rules? You only have 50 seconds, but you don't have to have a hand on the cart. It's like, oh, that changes things. But what happened was, do you know about the pathways part? I had gone the previous 2 evenings to choose a pathway, because I knew I had to start at the front of the store, and I knew I wanted meat. Meat is over there. So I had timed myself walking briskly on the first day, and it took me about 22 seconds if I walked just briskly because I didn't want to run over people. But on that morning, it was before the store opened, so I could run. And so I charted out my plan, and they said, you can get $500 maximum. And co-op did this as a national campaign. They had asked Morden Co-op if they knew of anybody that could benefit from this, and Morden Co-op said, hey, Youth for Christ. And they said, what will this go towards? And I said, well, one part, half of it is going to go to our supper club, and half of it is going to go to one needy family. And we already had somebody in mind. It was going to be beautiful. And so we start, they 3, 2, 1, go, and I beelined it. I made the path all the way down to, I don't know, aisle 8 or 9 or whatever it is, and then straight to the turkeys, and you're only able to grab 2 of any one item. You can't just grab 10 turkeys and say, done, right? So 2 of any one item. And so we went through, and you know what? 50 seconds goes by really fast, right? But at the end, I come to the front, and everybody's like, he only got meat. Did you plan this? I said, sure did. And so I had $586 worth of meat in there. And now one of the managers standing there goes, oh, we've never had anybody get over $500 before. What do we do? And the other manager says, oh, we just give it to them. And I said, no, you can't just give it to us. That's circumventing a system. This is a specific requirement. This was within your rules and regulations. And if you break that, it might set a precedence, because people are going to ask me, did you get $500? And I'm going to say, yeah. Did you get over? Yeah. What did you get? Oh, 586. Did you get to keep it? Yeah. Oh, we should go there too. Right? They were a little concerned about what that might do, everybody barraging in there. But this was for a national campaign. If it would have been for a local campaign, or if it would have just been me winning, there might have been a couple of hundred people that would have watched the video, right? Because it's your friends. You share the video with your friends. But that video, because of the Youth for Christ component, has seen over 70,000 views. Like, that's more than the city of Winkler. Right? That's a lot of people. But that's because there is a feel-good component to it. That's because they know where this is going. And then at the end, they said, okay, John, as the finale, after you got all the food, we want you to jump into the front shopping cart, and you're going to go like this when you're rolled out of the store, and then this big cart of meat is going to come behind you. And I just remember thinking, this is the same parking lot where 4 years earlier I said, oh yeah, Lord, I want to have some fun. And now it's videotaped. I was having fun, right? When you were thinking of pathways, when you're shopping, I had a pathway figured out. There was no parting of the Red Sea, but I laid it out for myself because I knew what I wanted. Is that how I always live my Christian walk? No, it's not. Wish it was, but it's not. I know what the pathway is supposed to look like, but sometimes as I'm going on the pathway, I go, that looks pretty attractive, this distraction over here. I think I'll stay here a little bit. But that, I think, makes me normal. But then God says, hey, I've got another do-over for you. Here's another opportunity to redirect, come back on my pathway. He never says, John, you're such an idiot. He says, oh man, I love you. You want to come back? When we were reading through John in our Tuesday night guys group, because that's the book that they decided we're going to go through together, and I'm reading John 1, then I read John 2, and then I read John 3. It was the first time that John 3:16 has ever snuck up on me. And it was like I saw it for the very first time, and then I saw how incredibly important John 3:17 was. There was no condemnation. So then how can I look at this boy that takes a fire extinguisher at Olympic sport and sprays everything? Do you think he was doing it to damage? That was a reflection of his life. He's saying, that's what my life looks like. How do you like me so far? He will tell me about it. He doesn't know that I know, but he's going to come and he's going to tell me about it, and he's going to feel shame, he's going to feel guilt, and I'm going to be able to lift up his head and say, you know what, dude? Not the smartest thing you did, but I still love you. How are we going to change this? How are we going to make this right? What do we got to do? And he's going to probably get assigned 1 billion community service hours that he gets to do at Youth for Christ. But this is pretty serious, right? This isn't just $300 or $500 or $700. This is a lot. And he needs to feel the significance of it, so that he gets to feel the significance of the weight that gets lifted off of him. I'm going to pray. Father, we look for pathways, and I think we do so on a daily basis, actually. You look at the center of a church, there's an aisle. We don't get terribly confused with it. It's the straight and narrow. But there's diversions. There's things that are along that path that can take at least our attention. But you know us. And we are so blessed for that. We're so fortunate. Thank you so much that you keep redirecting us on the pathway, that you keep wooing us back and saying, oh, come on, John. Come this way. So glad for that. Thank you for this church family that I get to just breathe. I get to share. I get to do a little bit of debrief, knowing that they're praying. And we need that. Ah, Lord. Again, thank you, and I sure pray these things in your name. Amen.